For over 50 years, human spaceflight has been confined to a relatively shallow pool. Since the end of the Apollo era, we've lived and worked exclusively in low Earth orbit, remaining within a few hundred miles of our home world. Reaching deeper into the solar system requires a specialized architecture capable of breaking that decades-long cycle. Moving a crew out of that gravitational well requires immense kinetic power. On April 1st, the Space Launch System provided that energy. Lifting off from Launch Complex 39B, the SLS physically severed the long-standing limitation on human reach. The countdown was notably smooth, proceeding more precisely than the previous wet dress rehearsals. Following a textbook ascent profile, the rocket delivered the Orion capsule, named Integrity, and its crew into their targeted orbit. With the SLS performing its delivery role exactly as intended, the focus now pivots from the mechanics of the launch vehicle to the endurance of the crew. In the silence of orbit, the mission becomes a test of human survival and the life support systems of the Orion capsule itself. Inside that capsule were 4 individuals: NASA's Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and the Canadian Space Agency's Jeremy Hansen. They carried the psychological weight of representing the 8.3 billion people left behind on a 500,000-mile journey inside a relatively small experimental vessel. This diagram shows their first major in-flight test, detaching the Orion capsule and manually maneuvering it around the ICPS upper stage. Wiseman and Glover took direct control of the flight stick. They piloted the spacecraft in close proximity to the spent stage, proving out the specific handling characteristics and targeting systems they will eventually need to dock with future lunar landers. Autonomous systems can handle routine maneuvers, but a successful mission relies on dynamic human adaptability. It requires trained pilots capable of taking manual control at the helm to navigate the unpredictable variables of deep space. Spaceflight is a constant, grinding battle against entropy. Hardware breaks down. Very early in the flight, the crew found themselves dealing with a degrading toilet, forcing them to rely on backup facilities while they diagnosed the problem. The initial suspect was a blocked vent line running between the waste system and the vacuum of space. Mission Control in Houston hypothesized that liquid had frozen in the line, prompting the crew to reorient the spacecraft to bake the vent in direct sunlight in hopes of thawing it out. But the sunlight didn't work. Here we see the mechanical reality. It wasn't a frozen line at all. Instead, engineers realized a chemical reaction was occurring with the wastewater treatment chemicals, generating a thick biofilm debris that completely clogged a filtration valve. That's when Christina Koch stepped up, dubbing herself the space plumber. She physically dismantled and repaired the plumbing on orbit. At the same time, ground teams were scrambling to manage a separate, unexpected pressure spike in the service module's propulsion system. In the isolation of a lunar transit, there is no such thing as a minor glitch. A clogged filter or a slight pressure variation in a propulsion system are immediate threats. They are neutralized only by relentless, round-the-clock human vigilance. By Flight Day 6, the crew of Integrity crossed a historic threshold, passing the maximum distance record set by the Apollo 13 crew in 1970, pushing further into the darkness than any human beings ever had. They didn't have much time to celebrate. NASA assigned them a rigorous list of visual observations. Because lighting conditions perfectly aligned, the astronauts became the first humans to look down at regions of the moon's far side with the naked eye, documenting subtle shifts in surface color and texture that robotic cameras can struggle to capture by space debris. The crew counted 6 distinct, brilliant microflashes as meteoroids went slamming directly into the dark regolith below them. The orbital mechanics of their launch window also provided a sequence of astronomical phenomena. They captured a redo of the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise, saw lunar features illuminated by sunlight bouncing off our planet, and witnessed a solar eclipse, with the moon backlit by the glowing dust of zodiacal light. During a communications pass with Houston, the crew pointed their lenses at 2 previously uncharted lunar craters and proposed names for them. One was called Integrity, after their capsule. The other they named Carol, in honor of Commander Wiseman's late wife, who passed away in 2020. Reaching the furthest point from our homeworld yielded high-value scientific observation, but looking back at the Earth from that distance also provided a profound reminder of human love and human loss. After a 500,000-mile round trip, the European service module detached, leaving the Orion capsule to face the atmosphere alone. The crew transitioned instantly from a silent, zero-gravity vacuum to hitting the Earth's upper atmosphere at Mach 31, nearly 24,000 miles per hour. To survive that impact, Orion used a skip re-entry profile. As this graphic demonstrates, the capsule dips sharply into the upper atmosphere, uses aerodynamic lift to bounce back up slightly, and then descends again. This bleeds off massive amounts of kinetic energy and protects the heat shield from the trauma observed during the unmanned Artemis I flight. The physical punishment during this descent is extreme. Plasma builds up around the vehicle, spiking temperatures on the heat shield to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about half as hot as the surface of the sun. Inside, the crew is crushed into their seats by 3.9 Gs of force, cut off from mission control during a 6-minute communications blackout. Emerging from the blackout with all systems nominal confirms the capsule's thermal and structural integrity. This successful transition from Mach 31 to a subsonic glide demonstrates that the heat shield and skip entry profile can reliably manage the intense physics of a deep space return. Jettisoning its forward bay cover, Orion deployed a precise cascade of parachutes. The drogue chutes caught the air first, followed by 3 massive main orange canopies, slowing the multi-ton spacecraft from supersonic velocities to a 20-mile-per-hour splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Waiting 5 miles away was the USS John P. Murtha. Navy divers rapidly approached the floating capsule, inflating a stabilization collar and a floating deck known as the front porch, allowing the medical and recovery teams to safely extract the 4 astronauts. The 10-day flight provided a critical baseline for how human crews and Orion interact during a deep space transit. By resolving mid-flight hardware failures and successfully managing a high-velocity return profile, the mission confirms that the current architecture is ready to support the multi-week durations required for the upcoming lunar landing missions.